So once more, please give rise to the motivation of bodhicitta and listen with bodhicitta. So let's move on to verse 38. Duryodhana and Pandava fought war for glory, whereas you've abandoned them, seeing them as a poisonous tree. So Duryodhana and Pandava, again, this is a reference to a very long story, but in short, these two figures, they waged war. And they waged war not just for a short period of time, but a very long period. For 12 or more years, they waged war constantly. And in the process, they killed many tens of thousands of people. They caused so much destruction. And why did they fight this war? Well, all for the sake of victory, of the glory of all for the sake of the glory of victory. Just for the sake of winning, basically. In contrast, you, Buddha Shakyamuni, have abandoned them. You've abandoned all conflict, all war, all strife, and also all glory, all such attachment to glory, seeing them as a poisonous tree. So in contrast to these other teachers who have caused so much destruction and harm for the sake of glory, you have abandoned all such harm, just like casting away a poisonous or a useless tree. When one realizes your teaching, one sees Mahadeva, the Lord of Yogis in the forest, as being a victim of ignorance. So when one realizes your teaching meaning the teaching of the Buddhas of Buddha Shakyamuni, what is that teaching? Essentially, it is the teaching of Vinaya. If one realizes this teaching, directly realizes this, then one will attain the genuine Dharma, or we could say the genuine truth. This is how the Buddha Dharma works or proceeds. We begin with a basis of pure discipline, and on that basis or foundation of pure discipline, we then engage in study, reflection, and meditation, stage by stage, hand in hand. So it is incredibly important that with this basis of pure discipline, we engage in study and also reflection and meditation. These need to go hand in hand. If, for instance, we practice meditation without study, without any understanding, we'll be like an amputee someone without hands trying to climb a mountain, and vice versa if we engage in study without applying that study in meditation. So study is so important, as is reflection, as is meditation. Each of these is dispensable and dispensable for one another. In contrast, practitioners like Mahadeva, the Lord of Yogis, they practice mere shamatha and shamatha alone. And the practice of shamatha alone is not a genuine path to liberation. From the perspective of the Buddha Dharma, there is nothing special or valuable about attaining siddhis and so on, common siddhis through the practice of shamatha alone, because that practice and those accomplishments can never lead to liberation. They are not a genuine path, not a genuine teaching. Okay, so now I'm going to just read through the next few verses so that we can, partly because we're just lacking in time, and so that we can move through the text a bit and get to some of the more important points. Of course, every verse here is important, and all of the stories referenced are important, but because of the time constraint, I'm just going to read through the next verses so that those who are listening in person with Rinpoche are receiving the long. Who did I receive this teaching from, the oral transmission or lung of this teaching from, as well as teachings on it? Well, I received it at Namdroling Monastery in South India from Khenpo Tsewang Döngyal, who is still alive, and it was a long time ago, 1983 or 1984. So I received the oral transmission for the root text that we're looking at, and also commentaries on it. I'm not sure who Khenpo Tsewang Döngyal received the transmission from. But he is the master I received it from. And this text also, you should know, is contained in the Tengyur, which is the collected translated treatises. So it is part of the Tengyur. So verse 40. Indra is called Ayala Raja, even today by the Brahmins, whereas your fame of excellent attainment is proclaimed by Indra. Vishnu was panic-stricken at the sight of Kalayavana. When chased, he hid under Mukukunda's bed, whereas you have no fear. It's heard that Daksha Prajapati had sexual intercourse with his daughter, whereas, O Muni, even your disciples from Acharan is not stained. Brahmins have asserted the transference of positive and negative actions, giving and receiving, between individuals, whereas you have asserted the non-wastage of the actions one has committed and the impossibility of bearing the fruits of actions one has not committed. So actually this verse I just read is a reference to... anyway, this is something I do want to pause and explain a bit. So about this verse we just read through, verse 43. Brahmins have asserted the transference of positive and negative actions, the giving and receiving between individuals of karma. So this is what many Brahmins, this is what they assert, that actually you can give away your karma, positive or negative, and likewise you can take on the karma of others, positive or negative. So karma, they believe, can be transferred. It is possible, they believe, to perform an action, accumulate karma, but not have to experience the ripening of that karma. In contrast, Buddha explained that actually that's not the way it works. Once you've performed an action, there is no way to get out of experiencing the karmic ripening of that action. Everyone has to face the consequences of their actions in terms of karma. So this is what's meant by the third line. You've asserted the non-wastage of the actions one has committed and the impossibility of bearing the fruits of actions one has not committed. So one has to experience the karmic ripening of one's own deeds, positive and negative. That said, it is possible to purify negative karma. For instance, if you perform very powerful, very significant virtue, that virtue can purify and exhaust your negative karma. It's said that generally speaking, there's nothing good about negative deeds except for the fact that they can be purified through confession. That's their one redeeming quality, the fact that they can be purified through confession. And the teachings explain that they can be purified through confession by means of the 4 powers. These 4 powers are explained in texts, manuals on the preliminary practices like Words of My Perfect Teacher, the 4 powers being the power of the support, referring to, well, in the practice of the preliminary practices, the support would be Vajrasattva, but it could equally be any other holy figure or sacred support, like a sacred object. Then we have the power of regret, so regret and remorse for one's negative actions, and then the power of the applied antidote, which is to engage in practice focused on one's negative deed, focused on purifying that negative deed. The antidote could be the meditation and recitation of Vajrasattva, it could be meditating on emptiness, it could be cultivating compassion, and so on. Indeed, cultivating compassion is an incredibly powerful way to purify negativity, negative karma. And then the 4th power is the power of commitment, the commitment and resolve to never again commit those same negative deeds, to make the same mistakes. So by applying these 4 powers, then negative deeds can be purified, as Buddha taught. It's not the case, though, that negative actions and likewise positive actions can be exchanged. They are not kind of an object or material thing that can just be handed around, passed from one hand to another, as many Hindu practitioners assert. So any deed once performed creates karma, and we all as individuals have to face the karmic consequences of our actions. However, there are ways to purify our negative karma, the 4 powers, confession, and so on, as just explained. So let's continue. Again, we need to just read through some of the next few verses, because we just don't have time to pause and explain everything. So verse 44, Kapila has conceived the Atma characterized by consciousness, whereas you have shown if Atma is characterized by consciousness, then the Atma is impermanent. Kanada has asserted the Atma pervaded everywhere is other than consciousness, whereas you have asserted if it is devoid of consciousness, it should have been like a wood. Digambara has asserted the life progresses and regresses with respect to physical size, whereas you have asserted that Atma has become a physical object and thus is subject to change. This notion of Atma is refuted extensively in the Buddhist teachings in texts like Semanandra, the commentary on valid cognition, and so on. Verse 47, Brahmins have shown the cause of sentient beings to be the Nitya Purusha, whereas you have asserted no permanent cause exists. Mahatma Sagara's 60,000 sons were burnt by the mere sight of Kapila, whereas you have shown compassion, even to him. Kapila, who has seen the tattva, asserted the production of all sentient beings because of the pradhan principle, whereas you've proclaimed all sentient beings are produced by their defilements and actions. So these verses are addressing the various tenet systems of the Hindu schools, the non-Buddhist schools. And as I said, various points of their tenet systems are refuted extensively in the Buddhist scriptures. Verse 50, Kapila and others have asserted the Atma at the liberation is the one that was wandering in samsara, whereas you've asserted, when one has attained liberation, it is like the ceasing of a fire one cannot count. A certain Tirthamkara has asserted, we could say a certain non-Buddhist has asserted liberation to be a destination, whereas being realized, you have asserted that which has destination is samsara. Verse 52, Digambara has asserted building temples and so on to be the causes of non-virtues, whereas, O Omniscient One, you have asserted these are the causes of virtue. So this is referring to the Jain teacher, founder of the Jain tradition, and Jain followers. Jainism is a tradition that existed at the same time as Buddha Shakyamuni, was contemporary to Buddha Shakyamuni in ancient India, or maybe actually appeared just slightly before, but was contemporaneous nevertheless. And the Jains believed that they and their tradition was superior to Buddha in all ways. So, for instance, Buddha would say, one tenet of Buddha's teachings is that one should decrease one's desire and cultivate contentment, right? And in terms of his monastic followers, the Buddhist monks and nuns are instructed to keep just 13 material possessions, 13 necessities, like their upper and lower robes, a water filter, and so on and so forth. Rinpoche listed quite a few, but in short, 13 material necessities and no more. This is explained in the Vinaya. The Jains, in contrast, well, they went even further. They said, no, actually it's indulgent to wear clothes. One shouldn't wear clothes even, not even an upper and lower robe. And so they went naked. The Jain practitioners go about naked. They say, one should not actually eat food with one's own hands. One should not feed oneself, but only accept food if it is offered if someone else is offering to feed one, and so on and so forth. So in terms of all of the aspects of conduct, Buddhist conduct, they kind of went a step further. For instance, they said, furthermore, they said, milk, one should not drink milk, that is a terrible negative karma. In contrast to Buddha, who actually described milk, yogurt, and these dairy products as a very wholesome food, very nourishing food. And the list goes on. Like it said that Buddha Shakyamuni practiced physical austerities for 6 years, right? And then they say, our founding teacher practiced physical austerities for 12 years. And then Buddha taught that one should avoid harming insects and so on when one is moving around and the like. And they say, that is not enough, Actually, one should not even wear shoes because the soles of one's shoes can kill animals, bugs and insects on the ground. And one should walk around with a broom. One should always take a broom with one and sweep the path before one to avoid harming any insects that might be there. So they're always going a step further, right, with their conduct. It's kind of to a level that's almost extreme or unbelievable. So in short, they propose that their teacher and their tradition is better than Buddha and his tradition in every way. And there are different interpretations of this. Some say that actually the Jains, being contemporaries of Buddha, were kind of making a point with reference to Buddha's own conduct, So they observe Buddha doing this or teaching that, and then they kind of, with reference to that, they go a step further. So that's one interpretation of the origin of the origin of these different aspects of their conduct, of their tradition rather. There are others, though, who say that wasn't really what was going on. They weren't just doing this with reference to Buddha, but it's more that their approach, their tradition has fallen to extremes. So Buddha stated that one's approach should never fall to extremes, right? One must avoid the extreme of eternalism and also the extreme of nihilism. So the Jains, we could say, have fallen into an extreme approach, an extreme attitude. Like in English we would say it's just over, it's just over the top. And the point that is mentioned here in our verse 52, is building temples. So Digambara, the Jain teacher, has asserted that building temples and so on is a cause of non-virtue. In contrast, Buddha Shakyamuni taught that actually to build temples, to build residences for the ordained Sangha, to support the ordained Sangha with food, meals and so on, is a source of great virtue, a source of great merit. But what does the Jain teacher Digambara and his followers say? They say, oh no, one shouldn't build temples, because actually when building temples you kill insects, and it's therefore negative karma. So one should not do any of those things. But here we need to distinguish. When we say negative karma, actually what the principal factor determining whether an action is negative or not is the mind. So the mind and one's motivation. If you are building a temple, you are not building that temple with the wish to kill insects, right? And it is indeed possible and likely that some insects will be killed in the process of the construction. But actually your motivation in building the temple is something very positive. It is to accrue virtue, support the Sangha, support the teachings of the Buddha, and so on. So yes, in terms of the action, if some insects are harmed, that is a negative action, but it is not the principal factor or dominating factor of that action, right? If one's motivation is positive. So it is taught that, Buddha taught that the determining factor when it comes to karma is one's mind, one's motivation. Of course, the physical action is important as well, but the determining factor is one's mind. So, in this vein, we can think of what Guru Rinpoche said, as recorded in the Chronicles of Padmasambhava, the Pema Katang. Guru Rinpoche explained that when they were building the first Buddhist temple, Samye, in Tibet, Guru Rinpoche said that any and all insects that might be hurt or even killed during the construction, and indeed all of the animals put to labor for the sake of the construction, because of their connection with this incredibly meritorious action of building the temple, then upon dying, those animals, those insects, would be reborn in positive states. So actually, you can see because of the nature of the activity and the nature of one's motivation in performing that activity, the animals that might be affected are actually benefited. And Buddha said similar things, said the same thing in his teachings. And we can actually see this understanding reflected in the law, right? So, if for instance someone hurts or maims someone intentionally, and maybe they've been planning to do it for a long time, well, the court of law takes that into consideration, right? And the penalty is then heavier. But if you hurt someone accidentally, with no intention, well, that lack of intention is taken into consideration and the penalty is lighter, right? So, in short, Buddha said that building temples, supporting the Sangha and so on, offering the meals is a source of great virtue, a source of great benefit and merit. And this tradition is indeed understood and upheld by the Chinese. There's a long-standing tradition of supporting the Sangha in this way, and this really is a sort of great merit, a wonderful thing. And in contrast, the Jain followers said that no, building temples is just outright non-virtue. So this is the distinction here. It has been asserted the soul transfers from one body to another, whereas you have asserted there is no soul other than the body. Vyasa has asserted that which is killed in a war out of anger would be born in a higher state, whereas, O Lord, you have asserted the mind in that situation will go to the lower state of birth. So, this is a reference to stories told in the Mahabharata, this epic poem. Vyasa was a sage, a teacher of that time. And he asserted that those who were killed in a war out of anger would be born in a higher state because such war is a holy war, a dharma war. It is a war being waged for the sake of the truth. And therefore everyone who dies in the process will be born in heaven or in higher states. So whether you kill others in the battlefield or whether you yourself are killed, well, all of it is beneficial. All of it will lead to greater rebirths. Sorry, not greater rebirths. All of it will lead to the attainment of heavenly states. But Buddha did not teach this. Buddha explained that if you die in a state of anger or hatred, well, you only have one destination, and that is hell. So we have the three poisons of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And we also have, we can expand that and speak of the 5 root emotions, the many subsidiary emotions, and so on. But the principal emotions are attachment, aversion, and ignorance, right? And Buddha explained attachment will lead one to rebirth as a hungry ghost, ignorance to rebirth as an animal, and aversion or hatred to rebirth as a hell being. Just as Noble Nagarjuna explains in his letter to a friend, the presence of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, that is non-virtue. The absence of attachment, aversion, and ignorance is virtue. And from among the various emotions, aversion or hatred is the worst, the absolute worst. So if you die in a state of anger, waging war, well, there is only one place you can possibly go. And in stark contrast, these non-Buddhist, these outsider teachers say that actually if you wage war and die at war in a state of intense anger, well, as a result, you will be born in a higher state because you are waging a holy war, a war of truth, a sacred war, and that will lead to a higher state. Buddha did not teach this. Buddha never said that waging war for the sake of one's religion is something positive or would lead to positive states. What did Buddha teach? Well, as quoted in Shantideva's The Way of the Bodhisattva, Buddha said, even if others destroy images of Buddha, the Buddhist scriptures, Buddhist temples, and so on, do not respond with anger, do not retaliate. Buddha said, even if the scriptures, even if someone burns the Buddhist scriptures, even if someone destroys a Buddhist temple, do not respond with anger, do not retaliate. That is not causing harm to sentient beings. What will harm sentient beings is if you retaliate, if you fight back. So this was Buddha's message, this was Buddha's teaching. He said, even if others attack our tradition, destroy our temples, burn our scriptures, and so on, do not fight back, do not get angry. You must not fight for the sake of your tradition, you must not fight for the sake of your religion. That will only bring about negative karma. On the other hand, these non-Buddhist teachers teach that they actually encourage one to wage a so-called holy war, to fight for one's religion, and they regard that as something positive. So this is another stark difference between the teachings of Buddha and non-Buddhists. Verse 55. It has been asserted reciting the names of the 5 Pandava brothers individually will earn merit, whereas you have condemned them for having indulged in the indecent act with one's own brother's wife. Skanda, Indra, Upendra, Rudra, and so forth always hold weapons for fear of others and to terrorize others, whereas you neither fear nor terrorize others. So a lot of the stories here have actually been referenced before, and they're being referenced again and again from, I guess, different angles. Verse 57, neither have you fear nor do you terrorize others, only you do not take up arms, thus you are superior to sentient beings. So now verse 57, neither have you fear nor do you terrorize others, only you do not take up arms, thus you are superior to sentient beings. So Buddha alone is completely free of pride, completely free of pride and arrogance, and as a result he has neither fear nor the wish to terrorize, or we could say intimidate others. There's actually a long story we could tell, well, several long stories we could tell to illustrate this, to illustrate Buddha's complete lack of pride, like the story of his encounters with King Makyajra and so on, but we don't have time for such stories right now. In short, Let's compare Buddha to, say, outsider or extremist teachers or deities like Brahma, Ram, Vishnu, and so on. They all bear arms, right? So Brahma holds a wheel, Ram holds a bow and arrow, Vishnu a spear, and so on and so forth. They hold these weapons, they bear these arms, and with those weapons they intimidate others, right? Why do they do that? Well, all of that stems from self-cherishing and the wish to intimidate others, which is a symptom of self-cherishing. Buddha, because he is completely free of such self-cherishing, does not bear arms. He has no wish to intimidate others, to impose himself on others. He walks around completely unarmed, merely holding a staff. So only you do not take up arms, thus you are superior to sentient beings. Now, verse 58. Vedas and others, the words of the defiled ones, are full of contradictions between earlier and subsequent statements, whereas yours are the words of the all-knowing. So the words and the teachings of teachers like Gyapa, a sage who taught the Vedas. Also we can think of teachers like Tulsidas, who wrote the Ramayana, and so on and so forth. These and other teachers, their words, the words of their teachings, are defiled words. And as a result, they're full of contradictions. So what do we mean by defiled when it says the words of defiled ones? Well, it means that these words, these teachings, are contaminated by the afflictions of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. That they're contaminated and motivated by notions of self and other, by self-cherishing, which then prioritizes oneself over others, self-interest, the wish to gain material wealth, status, respect, and so on and so forth. All of these aspects of selfishness which stem from self-cherishing, right? And as a result, when we look at the treatises of non-Buddhist writings, we can see that they are all written in this vein, right? They are all written with essentially a selfish motivation, and with the aim of attaining something that glorifies the self, whether it be victory, status, material wealth, a spouse, the fulfillment of one's desire. Like that would be the case in, if we look at Kama Sutra, the various Kama Sutras, for instance, the treatises on desire, likewise treatises on politics, on government, and so on and so forth. They're all motivated, and they all stem from self-interest. They all stem from self-interest, from attachment, aversion, and ignorance, attachment, aversion, and pride, and from the mindset that prioritizes oneself over others. These days we can look at modern science and actually see that modern science works in exactly the same way. The majority of scientific efforts go towards making new weapons, new ways to protect one's own country, to destroy others, right? And to that end, the creation of, like I just said, new weapons and so on, biological disease, chemical weapons, and so on and so forth. I don't actually, this isn't my own knowledge, but I've heard secondhand that only a very small percent of scientific effort is actually focused on improving the quality of life of people, of society, of countries. The vast majority of scientific effort and investment, whether it be in the US, China, Germany, any and all countries, is warfare, creating new weapons, self-defense of countries, of one's own country. And all of that rests on the mindset that prioritizes oneself over others, right? This mindset of self and other, which stems from attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And I've heard that if things were turned around and all of that effort, that scientific effort and investment were put into, focused on genuinely increasing the quality of life of people, then things could be improved in extraordinary ways. But that's not how it goes, right? Because all of these efforts are motivated by attachment and aversion. They're motivated by self-interest, by self-cherishing. And that self-cherishing, that mindset of self and other, dictates the nature, the character of all of these endeavors, scientific, political, business, and so on, right? We can see this in all aspects of the world. In contrast, Buddha's teachings are completely honest and sincere. This is discussed, this is highlighted in the second chapter of Tsema Namjal, the commentary of valid cognition. Rinpoche quoted 4 lines from there, which essentially say Buddha's teaching is completely valid because, and Buddha himself is completely valid. Why? Because Buddha never lies. Why does Buddha never lie? Because he is free of self-interest. So why do we lie? Why are we ever dishonest? Well, because of our attachment to self, right? Because of our self-cherishing. We lie always with some kind of, motivated by some kind of self-interest. If it's a lama or practitioner lying, like saying, oh, I have higher realization than I really do, well, they're saying that because they're hoping to get some donation, some respect or something or other. If it's a businessman lying, well, they're also lying with the hope to profit for themselves, right? In contrast, Buddha, because he is completely free of self-cherishing, of self-interest, of desire, he has no need and no desire for gain, respect, status, and so on, because he is free of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, and as a result, he never lies, he never says anything untrue, right? He has no reason to do that. As a result, Buddha's teachings, we can confidently say, are free of, say, untruths, free of dishonesty, and therefore they are genuine because they are utterly honest and true. If someone is very honest but lacks qualities, well, then there might not actually be that much value in their speech. But that's not the case with Buddha, right? Not only is he completely honest, but also endowed with great qualities, insight, wisdom, and so on. So therefore his teachings are really, truly are extraordinary, valid, and genuine. This is a really important point. We need to establish, meaning we need to establish for ourselves how and why our teacher and his teaching is valid and authentic. So this is what this verse is touching on here. Buddha's teaching being valid and authentic because it is true. Buddha's words are true and honest, in contrast to the defiled words of other teachers that are full of contradictions. So we'll just read through the next few verses. Verse 59, which speaks to the same thing. The literature of other tenets are mostly contradictory in the earlier and the latter, whereas your literature has no mistake in the beginning, middle, or end. Certain teachers have asserted teachings should not be given to those of low caste, whereas you have imparted teachings even to those of low caste. O devoid of attachment in your presence, who among the wise will bow before other master teachers, just as who will rely on a bad tree in the presence of a good tree? Kapila has asserted the attainment of the primordial wisdom, while one enjoys the objects, whereas, O devoid of non-virtues, you have asserted, how could there be liberation with thoroughly afflicted phenomena? Now, verse 63. The merits one has earned should be dedicated for the welfare of all sentient beings. O Bhagavan, this assertion of yours has not been made in the literature of others. So this verse 63 touches on a really important point. As it says here, the merits one has earned should be dedicated and can be dedicated for the welfare of all sentient beings. Bhagavan, this assertion of yours, of you, Buddha Shakyamuni, has not been made in the literatures of others. So Buddha taught that when one gathers merit, accumulates virtue, it can and should be dedicated to other beings. Of course, there is a difference between the efficacy of different beings' dedication, like the power of the dedication of an enlightened being versus that of a bodhisattva versus that of someone like us. But that doesn't change the fact that all merit, all virtue can be dedicated to others. It can be dedicated to others so that they actually attain it. This teaching on dedication, the practice of dedication, is something unique to Buddha Dharma. For instance, when our parents die, then we can dedicate merit to them, right, on their behalf. We can dedicate merit to any and all sentient beings. This really is a completely unique feature of or tenet of Buddha's teachings. But these days we hear about sort of Hindu teachers talking about dedication, Christian teachers likewise talking about dedication, and it really does seem that this is a case of them borrowing from the Buddhist tradition. You could say copying or borrowing from the Buddhist tradition and kind of following this example. Because the practice of dedication, when we look at the teachings themselves, it is unique to the Buddha's teaching. In the Hindu tradition, what do they say? They say that a couple must have a son. They must bear a son, even if they have 10 daughters. If they do not have a son, well, the father will go to hell or to the lower realms after death. Why? Why do they have this belief? Because they believe that it is vital for the father, once they've died, to be cremated by their son. So the father's cremation, the fire must be started, must be lit by their son's own hand, and then the son must also, in honor of their father, observe certain practices, certain kriya, we say spiritual austerities like fasting for a certain amount of days, performing a fire puja and so on, and dedicating that merit to the father. If the father does not have a son, and the son fails to do all of this, then the father is said to be destined to go to the lower realms. Because of this belief, then, having a son is believed to be so important, right, in that tradition. In the Buddha's teaching, however, it is not like that at all. All beings can dedicate all merit to all sentient beings, and they will attain it. So it's not only one's own son who can dedicate merit to one, but all beings. And there are a lot of stories, and we can find in the Buddhist sutras and so on, that demonstrate the power and the possibility of dedicating one's merit to others so that it is actually received, like the story of when Buddha was in Yangpatin, and he dedicated the merit of an offering to a group of pretas, or hungry ghosts. Anyway, we just don't have time to tell this or other stories, but I'll just add from my side, you can read an abridged version of that story in the words of my perfect teacher. Similarly, the Prajnaparamita literature and the Ornament of Direct Realization, Mundokyen, speaks of the practice of dedication, the power of dedication, especially it being a central practice on the path of meditation. So this is all to say that the practice of dedication is something unique to Buddha's teaching. It is not a teaching found in other religious traditions. So these days, when we see or hear teachers of other religions speaking of dedication, then it really does seem that they are borrowing from the Buddhist tradition. For instance, these days on TV and so on, you can find various Hindu teachers giving very compelling, beautiful teachings, really beautiful, inspiring teachings. But when you actually listen to what they're saying, you see that they are borrowing a lot of their content from the Buddha Dharma, from the teachings we find in the way of Bodhisattva, the words of my perfect teacher, and so on. And they're presenting it in a Hindu context, right? Or presenting it as Hindu teaching. Likewise, I hear that there are many modern Christian, we could say, sub-traditions, and also New Age traditions that are borrowing aspects of Buddha Dharma, like the practice of dedication. So I was told about various modern Christian traditions and New Age traditions and so on, borrowing from Buddha Dharma when I visited the US and North America last year. So this is to emphasize the fact that the practice of dedication, such a crucial practice, is unique to Buddha's teaching. As our text says, as our author states, O Bhagavan, this assertion of yours about the practice of dedication has not been made in the literatures of others. This is not something found in non-Buddhist literature, whether it be the Hindu literature of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and so on and so forth. It is only found in Buddha's teaching. Verse 64, as offerings to the gods, animal sacrifices are performed. Worldly people consider them to be their practices, whereas this is condemned in your teaching. So, as offerings to the gods, animal sacrifices are performed to beings like Shiva and so on. the sacrifices of goats and sheep and oxen and so on and so forth, and even humans. Yes, even human sacrifice. As recent as the 1930s, maybe 1935 or 6, the Tibetan master Ginnan Chögyal, he traveled from Tibet to India. Tibet had not yet been invaded by the Chinese then, and he traveled. There's in his records of his travels, he tells of how in Calcutta he was going along and there was a great crowd of people, a kind of big commotion. He went to see what was going on, and it was announced that today a human sacrifice would take place. A human was being sacrificed to goddess Kali. Then also he saw in Varanasi a child be sacrificed to goddess Uma. That there evidently was someone, a rich couple who had failed to have children, and so they bought, let's say, or maybe kidnapped, abducted the child of a poorer family or a beggar couple perhaps, and sacrificed this child to goddess Uma. They put the child, I think she said, in a basket of woven grass, set it alight, and then cast it into the river Ganges. So these sorts of practices exist to propitiate not just Shiva, Kali and Uma, but other deities as well. So what this verse is saying is it's pointing out that these sorts of blood sacrifices are made in other traditions, namely the Hindu tradition, but they are not made in the Buddhist tradition. This is not taught to be a spiritual practice by Buddha. This is a worldly practice. This is not the path to liberation and omniscience. Harming others cannot be the path to liberation and omniscience, and harming others is not Buddha's teaching. So, harming others is those who claim harming others to be a part of the spiritual path or a spiritual practice are non-Buddhist teachers, extremists belonging to the Hindu tradition. And we could also say these days it seems some Muslim practitioners too, who practice halal and regard the slaughter of animals as a spiritual practice, right? But in contrast, Buddha explicitly stated that harming others is not the spiritual path. Then you might say, well, why is it that so many Buddhists eat meat? Well, eating meat is nothing to do with Buddhism. Eating meat is not a Buddhist practice. It is not the Dharma. Eating meat is unquestionably negative karma. It is something to be abandoned, not something to be practiced. The fact that Buddhists might do it does not make it a Buddhist practice. Verse 65, how has he religiosity who always harms others' lives? O the Principal One, you have saved animals' lives at the cost of your own. So, how can you call harming others' lives, whether it be the life of a bug, of a beast, of a deer, an antelope, or an insect, or a human, any kind of animal, any living creature, in short? How can harming the life of another be the religious path? This is discussed at length in Shantideva's The Way of a Bodhisattva, right? So in contrast to those non-Buddhists who propose that harming others' lives is a spiritual path, you, the Principal One, you, Buddha Shakyamuni, have demonstrated saving the lives of others at the cost of your own. So Buddha actually gave his own life up, exchanged his own life for the life of others in order to benefit others. He did this so many times. In the way of a Bodhisattva, Shantideva says, the Buddhas cast aside self-interest and strove solely for the benefit of others. As a result, they attained enlightenment. As sentient beings, we strive solely for our own selfish benefit, and thus we continue to wander in samsara. This is the difference between Buddhas and sentient beings. What more is there to say? So that really sums it up. it's by casting aside self-cherishing and self-interest and working solely for the benefit of others that Buddhas become Buddhas. And it is by pursuing self-interest that we remain sentient beings in samsara. So Buddha Shakyamuni, he gave up everything for the benefit of others. We can see accounts of him having given his life up for others in his past lives. He gave up his wealth, his status, his possessions, his comfort, and so on and so on, so on and so forth. And he explicitly taught and emphasized that harming others is not the spiritual path, cannot be the spiritual path. So this is a major difference, a significant difference between the teachings of Buddha and the teachings of non-Buddhists. It's also taught in the scriptures, if you want to please the Buddhas, well, then benefit beings. It's a bit like, if you want to please a mother, well, if you treat her child well, automatically she'll be pleased, right? So we could say Buddha is like the mother of all sentient beings. So if you benefit beings, you treat them well, if you help them, that will automatically please and delight all of the enlightened ones. Verse 66. O you of the Shakya clan have understood truth, non-deception, brahmacharya, discipline and compassion to be noble dharma. There's so much to say about this verse. So Buddha was born into the Shakya clan or caste, and the manner in which Buddha took rebirth is explained in detail in the Kangyur. It's taught in detail in the Kangyur, meaning the collected words of Buddha, or 84,000. Buddha took rebirth in a royal caste, a royal family. And the way that he took rebirth is one of his 12 awakened deeds. So if we read the sutras, we will find detailed descriptions of how Buddha, when he was still in Tushita heaven, he inspected various possible families into which he could be reborn. He checked his potential mother, his potential father, potential birthplace, and eventually came to choose the Shakya clan. He came to choose his specific parents, and then he intentionally took rebirth in the Shakya clan and was born in Lumbini. So this is one of Buddha's 12 awakened deeds, and it is really important that as followers of Buddha, or as Buddhists, that we know what the 12 awakened deeds of the Buddhas are. It's easy to find out what they are. You can just look them up on the internet. It's very readily available. This information is readily available. We don't have time to go through each and every one of them here. But please, I urge you, if you're not already familiar, then please do some homework. Familiarize yourself with the 12 awakened deeds. If we call ourselves Buddhas, followers of Buddha, then we must know what his 12 enlightened deeds are. Otherwise, we don't really qualify as a Buddhist properly if we're not familiar with these. So another thing we must be familiar with are the 4 main sites of Buddha's, Buddha's life. So first of all is Lumbini, where Buddha was born. Second is Bodh Gaya, where Buddha attained enlightenment. Thirdly is Varanasi, or Sarnath, where Buddha first turned the wheel of Dharma, or first taught. And fourth is Kushinagar, where Buddha passed into Parinirvana. We must be familiar with these 4 places, and we must visit them. If we can visit all of these 4 major sites of Buddha's life, then it is said that we will be guaranteed a positive rebirth where we will have contact with the Dharma and be able to continue practicing. This is stated in the various scriptures that describe these sacred places, and it's also stated in the Buddha's own teachings in the Vinaya scriptures. I've read those statements myself because I've read the whole Kangyur, or collected words of the Buddha. Buddha himself said, if these 4 places can be visited by his followers, it will guarantee them a positive rebirth. So I entreat all of you to visit these places at least once in your life, ideally 3 or 4 times. And for those of you in Taiwan, you are all quite prosperous, you have a strong economy and so on, so it's not difficult for you to make that journey. You can easily afford it. There are many people, in Tibet and Nepal and so on, who would really struggle financially to make that pilgrimage. But for you guys, it's not much of a challenge. So it's very important to do this. as followers of Buddhists, as I said, at least once in your life, if not more. You of the Shakya clan, Buddha Shakyamuni, have understood truth, non-deception, and so on. So, truth is describing Buddha's teaching, right? The teaching of Buddha alone is true and completely true, utterly authentic, utterly free of falsity. So, we can say that Buddha Shakyamuni is the only person who has spoken the truth and the entire truth. What truth did Buddha teach? Did he speak? Well, he pointed out the truth that everything in samsara is suffering. Every aspect of samsara is suffering. No matter what state we're born in, no matter whether we're rich or poor, what kind of situation we're in, it is all suffering. There is no escape from suffering in samsara. This is really true, right? If we take an honest look at it, we can see that this is the truth. As the saying goes, when you look from afar, it seems others are happy, but when you go close up, you see that they're suffering. So it's always the case that the grass looks greener on the other side. When I look at you, then I might think, oh, they seem to be so happy. They seem to have such a good situation. You might look at me and think, oh, Rinpoche has such a nice life. Look at him sitting up there on the throne. He has such an easy time of it, and so on and so forth. But every single one of us, in spite of appearances, struggles and suffers in some way. Some might be physically unwell, some might have family problems, financial problems, or what have you. No one is immune to suffering. This is the nature of samsara. That is the truth. What is the source of this suffering? Well, Buddha explained the source, the origin of suffering, to be attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And again, this is the truth. Attachment, aversion, and ignorance are wellsprings of suffering. As long as we are defiled by attachment, aversion, ignorance, pride, arrogance, and so on, then we cannot escape suffering, because these are the source, because these emotions are suffering in themselves, and they are the source of further suffering. It's a bit like holding a burning coal in your hands. If you are clutching onto a burning coal, your hand is going to be burned, and you're going to feel pain. There is no way around it. Likewise, as long as you are polluted by attachment, aversion, and ignorance, you're going to suffer as a result. The cause, those emotions are the cause of suffering, and they are suffering in and of themselves. And the result they bring about is, of course, suffering as well, right? Because the nature of result is going to reflect the nature of the cause. So to go back to the analogy of holding a burning coal in your hand, there's no use just running around screaming in pain. If you want to rid yourself of the pain, you need to drop the coal, right? So likewise, if we want to rid ourselves of suffering, we need to rid ourselves of the afflictions, which are the source of that suffering. If we do that, and we can do that, we can attain cessation, a state of nirvana, of peace, which is free of suffering, both in cause and result. How to attain this state of cessation? Well, through the truth of the path, which involves cultivating the 37 factors of enlightenment, the 4 applications of mindfulness, the 4 relinquishments, the 5 powers, 5 faculties, 8 eightfold noble path, and so on. So all of these points Buddha taught are true, and they are the truth and nothing but the truth. So therefore, you of the Shakya clan, you have understood truth. You've also understood non-deception. Buddha's teachings are completely free of deceit and falsity. In a sutra requested by, I think the title was Sutra requested by Ananda, we find the lines, even if the earth were to become the sky were to become the earth, even if that sort of extreme change were to occur, Buddha's teachings would never waver, Buddha's teachings would never change. The truth of Buddha's words would never change. So this is actually, when it says, even if the earth were to become the sky and so on, this is a reference to the foretold end of the world, right? It said that basically that this physical world of ours will come to an end and disintegrate into space and so on, right? As the scientists also predict, and it's said that this kind of the beginning of the end has commenced. So that kind of extreme change can happen. Sky can turn into the earth into the sky, and so on. But Buddha's teachings will not change because they are completely undeceiving, unchanging, undeceiving. Then we have brahmacharya. So brahmacharya literally means pure conduct, flawless conduct. Or what is a flaw? What is an impurity? Well, attachment, aversion, and ignorance. Essentially, these afflictions are what is impure. So the negative actions of body, killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct that are motivated by these afflictions, then the four verbal non-virtuous actions of lying, divisive speech, harsh words, and meaningless talk, and similarly the three mental non-virtuous actions of ill will, envy, and wrong view. So all of these non-virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind motivated by attachment, aversion, and ignorance, these are all impurities, these are all flaws. To be free of such flaws is to have pure conduct, brahmacharya. The term brahmacharya typically refers to the discipline, the conduct maintained by bhikshus, by fully ordained monks. But in a wider sense, it can refer to being free of such faults and having pure conduct in that sense, pure conduct that is embodied by those who observe full monastic discipline of a bhikshu. Discipline, we could also translate this word as being completely tamed. So Buddha is completely tamed. He embodies discipline in that sense. As Buddha himself said, to tame the mind or discipline the mind is excellent. To have a disciplined mind is to attain happiness. Compassion refers to love and compassion for sentient beings. Buddha has compassion for sentient beings, for all beings. It is motivated by his compassion that he teaches the path to liberation and omniscience, giving such a wealth of teachings that guide all manner of beings step by step to the state of liberation from samsara and the perfect Buddhahood of omniscience. It is out of this compassion that Buddha teaches the noble Dharma, because if Buddha had compassion but didn't teach, well, that would not bring us any benefit, right? But Buddha does teach out of his compassion. So all of these qualities, truth, non-deception, brahmacharya, discipline, and compassion, and the noble Dharma, these are the unique qualities of Buddha Shakyamuni. Verse 67. Though well-versed in the vast Vedanta, Vyasas recommend killing enemies when confronted in war. So though well-versed in the vast Vedanta and in those scriptures, well-versed and so convinced of their worth, so admiring of that literature, then Vyasa has recommended killing enemies when confronted in war and actually proclaimed that as a spiritual practice. This has been said in the world by worldly teachers, by non-Buddhist extremists. But you, Buddha Shakyamuni, have taught to show compassion even to enemies. So even when faced with war, even when confronted with war, then you've taught us to have compassion for even our worst enemies, those who might have murdered our father, murdered our mother. You've taught us not to respond with anger, but actually to cultivate compassion for all. Verse 68. There was a legend: Kumara pierced his uncle with a spear, whereas, O hero, you have cut the net of afflictions with the implement of wisdom. Vishnu could not even protect his own consort's chamber, whereas, O the principal one, you were always engaged in the protection of all sentient beings. Vishnu had to leave Mathura for fear of fighting against Jarasandha, whereas, O Muni, there is no sentient being who can frighten you. Now verse 71. Due to Vishnu's faults, all of his relatives were destroyed, whereas you have liberated all of your relatives from this samsara. So verse 71. Due to Vishnu's faults. So Vishnu is one of a trinity of deities, right? Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara. Or I think Maheshwara is often is said Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So Maheshwara and Shiva just being synonyms. Brahma is said to be the creator of the entire world. Vishnu is the sustainer of the world, and Maheshwara or Shiva is the destroyer right? So they comprise this sublime trinity, it's said. So in this sense, actually, these three, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwar, are relatives, right? They are closely related. Nevertheless, as we learned previously, earlier on in the text, there was a reference to this story of Vishnu and Brahma getting into a conflict, and Brahma actually using his wheel to decapitate Vishnu, right? We told this story earlier, how Vishnu was keen to get all of the divine Amrita for himself, and so he kind of set up a distraction in an attempt to get it for himself. And when Brahma found out, then he threw his wheel at Vishnu and decapitated him. So that is how Vishnu and his relatives treat each other. They harm each other, they get into fights, they even kill each other. Whereas you, Buddha Shakyamuni, have liberated all of your relatives from this samsara. So how so? Well, Buddha liberated his father and also his mother, leading them to the state of liberation and omniscience. Buddha Shakyamuni, went to the heaven realms to see his mother, because his mother had already passed away, and he spent 49 days there in the heaven realms, teaching his mother the Buddha Dharma and establishing her in the truth. Only once she was well established in the truth did he return to the human realm. How did he tame and liberate his father? Well, actually, his father was a very arrogant man, and did not easily inspired with faith in his son, Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha tried so many things, so many times to bring him to the Dhamma, but he was not successful, and eventually he sent Moggallana, his disciple, to tame his father, to inspire his father with a display of miracles. And this did humble his father, bring him around to the Dhamma, and then Buddha was able to teach him, his father, with an open mind, a mind of faith. Buddha taught him the Four Noble Truths, and as a result, his father attained the state of Arhat. So in this way, Buddha brings benefit to all of his relatives by establishing them in liberation. In contrast, Vishnu and others, they only harm one another, kill one another even. Buddha, on the other hand, only brings benefit to his relatives. So we are very almost finished with our text, the praise of Buddha's superior qualities. What we come to next, these closing verses, are an explanation of how one gives rise to, finds faith and confidence in the teacher, meaning Buddha Shakyamuni and his teaching, right? So anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. First of all, I just want to say, in conclusion, since we've covered the majority we've covered the majority of the verses of the text. Well, because of the time constraint, we weren't able to go through all of the verses in detail. There are so many stories referenced here, and I haven't been able to explain all of them. That was largely due to the time constraint, but also there's, of course, the constraint of my own knowledge, my own education. I'm not familiar with all of these stories, so I've explained the ones that I knew and was able to explain. And the ones that I don't know, of course, I haven't been able to explain. And also because I'm not very educated and accomplished myself, then of course there's no doubt that I've made mistakes here. I might have told some of the stories wrong, or there might be other failings and shortcomings in my teaching, so I want to apologize for any and all mistakes I might have made, because all of you here, yes, you're not all monks and nuns, but you are all very educated and accomplished people, as I'm well aware. You are doctors and engineers, accomplished business people, authors and the like, and there are some monastics amongst you, indeed, like some nuns who have done a lot of scriptural study at places like Larungar and so on. So first of all, my apologies for any and all shortcomings in my own teachings here today. The more I study and analyze Theravada literature, O Lord, the more faith and interest grow in my mind toward you. So we're in verse 72 here. So the author is saying that the more I study, analyze, and think about the non-Buddhist literature, well, the more that my faith actually grows in you and your teaching. Because this Theravada literature, what is it about? Well, it is subject matter is quite meaningless. It is full of contradictions. It is limited. It is inaccurate, actually in discord with reality. So when I see all of those shortcomings, then in contrast, I look at your teachings, I feel ever-growing faith and interest in your own teachings, because I can see clearly that they are valid, they are free of contradictions, they are genuine and true. Verse 73, thus the mistaken tenets of the not all-knowing corrupt the minds of others. The mistaken tenets of non-Buddhists, of extremists, which are taught by those who lack all-knowing, who lack omniscience, they corrupt the minds of others, of otherworldly people, and the corrupted mind is unable to see even the faultless master teacher. So this is referring to the fact that in order to recognize the value of something, we ourselves need a certain value, right? Meaning we ourselves need, we could say, a degree of education or understanding or insight, right? Let's take the example of diamonds or gold. To actually recognize a high-quality diamond, to recognize pure gold or high-quality gold, you need to have a certain knowledge, right? A certain ability yourself. If you're completely ignorant of the qualities of diamonds, gold, and so on, you're not going to be able to recognize a fake from a priceless diamond. You're not going to be able to recognize low-quality gold from pure gold. So, to recognize quality and worth, to recognize something of high quality, something of high worth, you yourself need certain qualities, right? This means that in order to follow Buddha's teachings, you yourself need certain qualities. So either we will enter the Buddha Dharma through merit, the strength of our merit, or the strength of our intelligence. Otherwise, there is no way, no possibility for us entering the Buddhist path. For those of us who are Chinese or Tibetan, well, we are born into a long-standing Buddhist tradition, and with that influence, our kind of environmental or social influence, then we end up following the Buddha Dharma. But we can look to places like the various Western countries where interest in Buddha Dharma is growing all the time. There might not be that many people who are actually formally Buddhist there, but there is a growing interest and appreciation of Buddha Dharma. Why? Because those people with their intelligence can recognize the quality, the authenticity of Buddha's teaching, right? But a corrupted mind, as the text says, a mind that is enshrouded in attachment, aversion, and ignorance, a mind that is clouded by self-clinging, such a mind will not be able to see and cognize the qualities of the Buddha Dharma, and therefore they will not follow the Buddha Dharma. Just like when you lack the ability to recognize a pure diamond or pure gold, then you're not going to be able to appreciate pure diamond or gold, even if it's right in front of you. Or we could use the example of someone who is born blind. That person will not be able to see the sun, right? But that is not the fault of the sun. That is the fault of or due to their blindness, right? So people might not appreciate and follow Buddha's teaching, but that is not the fault of the Buddha Dharma. It is the fault of their corrupted mind. It's been said that Buddhism negates worldly gods like Brahma, Vishnu, and so on. Brahmins and Vedas, so the Brahmin caste and the Vedic scriptures and so on. Why don't they think they're false? Because, as for your teachings, so I'm not so clear about those last two lines of verse 74, sorry. As for your teachings, Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings, they lead to better and better attainments. Meaning, when we follow the path set out by Buddha Shakyamuni, well, it is blissful and excellent at beginning, middle, and end. When we first enter the path, those first stages are blissful. Those blissful first stages lead us to ever more blissful stages as we progress on the path to enlightenment, until we eventually attain the blissful state of enlightenment itself. So, Buddha's teaching is a path that leads from bliss to bliss. Thus, it is better to follow your teachings, Buddha, the lion's roar. So, the lion's roar is a phrase to praise the qualities of Buddha's speech, and the lion's roar typically is an epithet for Manjushri himself. Verse 76, this is a verse of dedication. May all beings become like you by the merits I've accumulated through the recitation of your excellent virtues. So, what has the author done in this text? Well, he has recited, he has expounded the excellent virtues and qualities of Buddha, right? The inconceivable secret of enlightened body, speech, and mind. And to recite these virtues or to speak of them, to describe them, creates incredible virtue, incredible merit. So, in this text, the author has elaborated on these virtues by comparing Buddha with non-Buddhist teachers, right? He's shown what qualities non-Buddhist teachers lack, and in contrast, what qualities Buddha possesses. He's described the extraordinary virtues of Buddha's enlightened body, speech, and mind, and through all of the merit he has thus generated, he dedicates here to all sentient beings of the 6 classes, headed by his own parents, so that they may all become just like you, Buddha Shakyamuni. Now verse 77. O Lord, the merits I've accumulated through the recitation of Visheshasattva, that's the Sanskrit title of this treatise, praising the superior qualities of Buddha. May all sentient beings enter the path of enlightenment. So this is again a verse of dedication, but a specific verse of dedication, it seems, specifically dedicating the merit accrued from the composition of this text, the praise of the superior qualities of Buddha. So, O Lord, here the author is calling out to Buddha Shakyamuni, saying, hey, Buddha, the merit I've accumulated through the recitation or composition of this text, where I've praised your superior qualities of body, speech, and mind, through this merit, may all sentient beings, all beings of the 6 classes, so the hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals, who comprise the 3 lower realms, and as well as the beings of the 3 higher realms, humans, demigods, and gods, may all mother sentient beings of the 6 classes enter the path of enlightenment through this merit. Now, there are 3 types of enlightenment: the enlightenment of Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. So may all beings without exception enter the path to these 3 types of enlightenment, a bit like entering the highway. Once you're on the highway, then you are moving in the right direction, and it's guaranteed you're going to reach your destination, right? Now the colophon. Thus ends the Visheshasattva, this text, praising the superior qualities of Buddha, composed by Acharya Udbhatasiddhasvamin, or Totsun Drubje in Tibetan, and translated by Indian abbot Sarva Deva and monk translator Ratnavara, later edited and verified by monk Palsik Rakshita. So this text was composed by the master Totsun Drubje in the 3rd century BC, so that means around 2,300 years ago. And it says so. This was translated by the monk translator Ratnavara, who was one of the translators of the early translation period during Guru Rinpoche's time. And then later, during the period of the next period of translation in Tibet, then it was edited and verified by the monk Palsik Rakshita. So now we've concluded the teaching of this text. So we've now concluded the teaching, like I said, and I want to thank everyone for coming here, listening so attentively, and I'm very glad that everything has gone very well. So thank you to everyone for making this happen. I'm really glad we had the opportunity to gather here and discuss this text, because its subject matter is so important, especially for the younger students amongst you. It's so important that you understand these differences between Buddha and his teachings and other teachers and teachings. So I'm very glad that we were able to gather here and discuss this teaching. So now let's dedicate the merit.